everyone. I'm Sheila Price Brooks, and I'm the co-host of this brand new podcast called Sleep Paralysis News. It's a safe space. It's a place where we speak to people about their sleep paralysis experiences, where we share information, where we get up-to-date news. I'm Sheila Price Brooks, as I said, and I'm a PhD researcher. I'm also a long-time experiencer of sleep paralysis. And I'm joined here with my co-host, Cyrus. Cyrus is from Ohio. He's a filmmaker, psychology graduate, and he's working on a film at the moment, which is all about sleep paralysis. So without further ado, I'm going to go over to our guest here, Musa. And Musa, I'd like you to share with us your sleep paralysis experience.
Yeah, so I've only experienced it once. I don't know how prevalent it is amongst other people, but this was maybe about 10 years ago. I was in school in college at the time, and so I guess I was in a period going through a lot of stress, and I had never heard about sleep paralysis prior to that. So one day I get back after school, and I think I had just gotten worked out, so I was pretty tired. And I get back to my room, and it's late evening, a shower change, get ready, and I'm eating dinner. I'm sitting on my couch watching TV, and being kind of the couch potato I am sometimes, I end up falling asleep on the couch. And I don't know how long I was asleep for, but when I woke up, it kind of took me a minute to kind of get over this confusion and realize that I'm fully awake, but I can't move my body for some reason. And it took me a few minutes to kind of get over this confusion and realize like there's actually something going on. I'm not just dreaming or anything. And it's hard for me to say how long it lasted, but it felt like forever. And I kept getting what I found out was actually fairly common, this eerie sense that someone or something was behind me. And then after some time, just kind of mentally trying to like burst out of this, I guess, inability to move, eventually something triggered and I was able to like somehow spin around and turn around in this, and I was breathless. I remember that because I had been exerting so much energy to try to get out of this motionless state. And I turned around, saw no one, nothing there. So I kind of calmed down a little bit, and then picked up my phone and Googled what just happened and discovered sleep paralysis and started reading about it. Once I read about it, I kind of calmed down and I wasn't so freaked out, just to understand that it was a fairly common phenomenon. But from what I read, I didn't find out that they know any true cause of it. I guess there's a lot of theories, maybe. I'm sure you guys know more than I do. Yeah.
Great. That's thanks for sharing that. So tell me, I mean, I've got quite a few questions that I'd like to ask. But first of all, did you tell anybody about your experience?
I told a few close friends, and that's really it. I mean, over the years, I've been pretty open about it. Whenever it comes up naturally, I do tell people. But yeah.
Okay. You also said that you were fully awake, and so you knew you weren't dreaming. That's really a significant statement there.
Really?
What you're saying is that, were you sleeping and you were woken up, or did you wake up and it's like an alternate dimension? Or try and help us to understand that a bit more.
Some of it's kind of like a blur, but it felt like I was asleep and I just somehow woke up, and after a minute or two realized that I wasn't able to move consciously, but I was consciously able to see what was around me. So it kind of like I definitely did fall asleep, but I kind of eventually woke up and kind of came to this realization that I'm in this paralyzed state and I have no idea why. Yeah.
And this when you woke up, the place that you were in, was it the
Mhm.
same place that you went to sleep in?
Yeah. Mhm.
So you were seeing it in real time,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you weren't literally awake.
Correct. And my TV was still playing, so it was still happening. Yeah.
Yeah, and how do you rationalize that now? What's your framework for that?
Well, I read about it, and some of the research I read mentioned that a lot of people don't really truly understand the true cause of sleep paralysis. But one thing I did read is they theorized that maybe stress and not getting adequate sleep on a consistent basis uh, could be, related to it. And I've always felt that to be true because I've always kind of struggled and had issues with sleep. And like I alluded to, I was, at that time I was in school, so pretty high stress phase of life. So I, it kind of just made sense to me if that makes sense to you guys. And so I just accepted that and chalked it up to that. And it was an isolated incident, hopefully. And so it doesn't bother me.
Yeah, there's some researchers that say that we go through sleep paralysis so we don't act out our dreams, especially in that rapid eye movement stage when you're deepest stages
Wow.
of sleep. So I've jolted myself to sleep, like swinging a bat or
Wow.
swiping something, and you just wake up, So that might be a theory that we stay paralyzed so that our minds can renew ourselves in that deep sleep. And it might that and we still don't know. That's why we're having these podcasts so we can put all these
Yeah.
stories and testimonies together to really see the commonalities so that we can further discover, why are we going through this and why is it not as popular as it should be? I think it's like happens to 20% of the population. I've heard different numbers, but I think 20% sounds right. And it's just a very mysterious phenomenon. So that's what we're doing, exploring.
Yeah,
I'd
that's
like
interesting.
to, I would like to pick up on this airy feeling that you had that was so intense that you woke up thinking that somebody was there behind you.
Mhm.
So did you see anything at all?
I didn't see any figure or anything like that. All I saw was the room in front of me where I fell asleep. But I just had a sense that someone or something was behind me, and I just needed to turn around immediately. And I just couldn't turn around, and that just kept freaking me out even more. Yeah.
And and was it a foreboding sense or was it a welcoming kind of sense that somebody was there?
No, it was not very welcoming.
No.
It felt very eerie. Yeah.
It's also interesting that you say you had this 10 years, was it 10 years ago you had this experience, and
Yeah.
it's still there very much
Oh
in
yeah.
your memory.
Yeah. It definitely scarred me.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
it's left its mark.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, it was such a like I said, I'd never heard of sleep paralysis prior to that. So when it happened to me in that moment, I was so baffled, and that's why I immediately had to look up what could have been possibly the cause of this and kind of get a little more understanding of it. And just kind of reading that there were a lot of other people who do experience it kind of made me felt a lot more okay that it wasn't something wrong with me particularly. So yeah, yeah.
Were you afraid to go back to sleep after that? Did you, in case it happened again?
No, surprise. Now that you say that, it kind of seems obvious that I probably should have been, but no, I wasn't. No.
Okay, that's very, 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 very interesting. They,
Yeah.
the sleep experts do say that our body does paralyze it. We become paralyzed when we sleep, to
Okay.
stop us from acting out our dreams. That's what the sleep scientists say. So that otherwise, you'd have a dream and you'd be doing all sorts, wouldn't you? So the body does shut down in that way. That's what it says. So perhaps that accounts for the paralysis part, or perhaps it doesn't. But there are still so many unknowns,
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, and it's funny how you, Cyrus had earlier alluded to the fact that more people aren't connected about this. And when I found out about this podcast, it was just like, it just made so much sense. I'm like, how amazing that we can use technology today to kind of create that connectedness around this subject that is so a lot more widespread than most people realize.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty cool.
So
Yeah, thank you for that.
my question is, are you happy that it happened to you, or do you wish it didn't happen to you? We try to ask all our experiencers that question. How do you feel? Are you glad that happened to you, or do you wish it never happened to you?
I'm glad it happened to me once. I yeah, because I'm sure there are people who might struggle with it. So I try not to like make it too laughing of a matter, but I would not want to go through it again, So yeah.
Yeah. And do you think, can I ask, do you think that it's changed your outlook, on certain things about your life, humanity, who you are, what you are? Has it influenced you in any way?
Um, it definitely humbles you and makes you realize that at some level we're not always fully in control of our bodies and what happens to us, and even our minds, and it's a very awakening moment, and that's probably why that memory, like I said, even 10 years later, is still burnt into my head.
Yes, I agree with that statement that it's humbling. My scariest experience, I mean,
Yeah,
I was just terrified to the point that I've never experienced terror or fear like that in real life. So it was humbling that I walk around life like you can try to act like a tough guy, but boy,
yeah,
this will break you down to the innermost fear that you can feel. So I had a
yeah,
similar experience to you where I felt, someone approaching me from behind, and it took me a long time to snap out of it, but when I did, I didn't see nothing but that feeling. So from your experience, what have you taken away scientifically and spiritually from that, if anything, science and spiritual wise?
mhm. It's kind of funny because for me, I tend to mix a lot of the science and the spiritual sometimes. And what I mean by that is, I've always kind of struggled with sleep in general, with, insomnia from a teenager, my mid-teenage ages. And, you know, you don't, at a younger age, of course it does kind of impact you, but as you get older, the inconsistency of sleep really takes its toll on you from a mental and emotional side too.
Yeah.
And I started to get a lot more serious about sleep health and working on my sleep, because prior to that, just like a lot of other people, I just kind of accepted it as, I'm in this phase of life. It's just I'm busy, or I'm not, my mind works different from whatever it is. That's why I can't sleep, whatever it is. But at some point you just got to kind of put all that aside and say, I've got to just figure out what I need to do for my situation to get this right. So it really kind of hit deep in that sense, in terms of spiritualness, and just kind of making me just think about sleep and health and my mind a little differently. And scientifically, it just took me down this journey of learning more about my health. I was always been pretty health conscious person, and it always fascinated me, the science of health. But that experience just took it to a whole nother level. And prior to that, just like a lot of people, my impression of health was simply just, maybe diet and exercise. But when you add sleep and hydration and emotional health and stress management to the picture, and you kind of start to understand how those things impact our health as well, it's, like there's a bunch of pieces to the puzzle. And so it was very eye-opening for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you've shared that with us, because your health is multifaceted, isn't it? There are, like you said, there are many areas. In terms of the sleep paralysis, would you say that if you had to choose, would you say that it was a spiritual kind of engagement or experience? Would you say that it's a neurological something, something maybe in your brain, something in your sleep state, something along those lines? Or would you be in the middle that says, I just don't know?
Initially I thought it was more of like a neurological scientific uh, thing, and I still feel like there's some aspect to that. But then when I was doing my research, I came across some pretty interesting things, like the fact that a lot of people around the world experience this, and quite a few tend to share a very similar experience, particularly of seeing a similar image or feeling a similar image behind them. And the fact that so many unrelated people and unrelated incidences seem to have a very common, story to them, there's some spiritual play here, and I maybe you guys might know this. I read also that somewhere in Europe, maybe Finland, in some of their folklore, they have, I guess, a mythical being called Mir, or which they call Mir, and it's actually based off the descriptions that people describe a shadowy figure, like what we describe in sleep paralysis commonly. And apparently, that is the basis of where the term nightmare comes from. Have you guys heard that before?
Yeah, I think it's Scandinavia.
No?
It's Scandinavia.
Scandinavian? Okay, and I found that so fascinating.
And it,
Yeah,
yeah,
I tell everyone that story.
yeah, the word nightmare is originated from sleep paralysis, and it's the
Mhm.
air that you'd see in your sleep.
Yeah,
And that's where you get the
yeah.
term nightmare from. Yeah, and it's very interesting. So that means then that it was very prevalent back in those days for our language to be influenced by sleep paralysis.
Yeah,
That is very, very interesting. And it would be called,
Yeah, I believe sleep paralysis has been around since people have been sleeping. I don't think this all of a sudden came around in the
yeah,
1300s, or like ever since mankind has been sleeping and we've been going through rapid eye movement stage since the beginning of time. We have insight to a deeper degree of the truth of the world that we live in. And it's very interesting.
yeah,
yeah, so it's very much grounded in history and folklore, and the very fact that we'll say, oh, I had a nightmare last night. You don't realize you're talking about, in the olden days, it would have been you had sleep paralysis.
yeah.
That's what we would be saying. So it's very interesting that you brought that up, Musa.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought up that people are describing the same experiences all over the world. And that's really what led to my my script and my film project. And I do like to use the term collective consciousness of this whole world. There's
Yeah.
8 billion people in the world. And somehow we're all connected. Not going to get too deep into it. Don't want to offend
Yeah,
nobody with, spirituality or nothing, but
yeah,
there is a collective conscious that, we are experiencing the same thing from all over the world. There's no other explanation. Like it's science and spirituality combined to me, but it's
yeah,
an unbelievable phenomenon that we can explain the same experiences and we've never met each other. We're across the country. It's like, what's
Yeah,
going on, guys? What's going
yeah,
on?
yeah. It's cool and creepy at the same time.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Musa. I don't know if there's anything else that you'd like to add, Cyrus.
Nope, that was great. I appreciate your time. Thank you for sharing that. And I hope we all learn from one another in this journey.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your guys' time. It was very interesting. It's like I said, it's so cool that this podcast exists to kind of cover this and connect the people who are experiencing the same things without realizing it. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Musa.
Take care.